Let me tell you something. Heidi's taken a lot of crap over the last 50 years. She doesn't deserve it. Lay off. Hey, Mark, it's set. Brady versus Mahomes. Buccaneers versus Chiefs. Buccaneers. Super Bowl 54. Super Bowl, man. 100 million viewers in the United States last year. 160 million worldwide. More viewers than any other event, not called the World Cup. Europeans don't even know what's going on. They just cheer because they like to cheer. You know, to decide who gets to telecast the Super Bowl, the four networks don't even compete. The NFL just gives them a price and they open up their wallets. They rotate from year to year to year. There are so many eyeballs on the Super Bowl that the networks can charge $5.5 million for a 30-second commercial spot. Budweiser last year spent $50 million on their ads during the 2020 Super Bowl. It's that big of a deal. But history, man, never mind the Super Bowl. Let's go back to 1968, when maybe the NFL wasn't that big a deal. Or so thought the National Broadcasting Corporation. Let's look at the Heidi game. Let's go rogue. It was 1968. The NFL was in the process of merging with the American Football League. The AFL teams were trying to reach the level of play of the NFL teams. The AFL's Kansas City Chiefs were beaten by the NFL's Green Bay Packers in the first Super Bowl in 1967, 35-10. By the way, 30-second commercial spot in Super Bowl I, $42,000. Total viewers, 51 million. In Super Bowl II, the AFL's Oakland Raiders were beaten by Green Bay 33-14. The AFL would finally break through in Super Bowl III, though, in 1969. The line in Vegas was Baltimore Colts by 18. New York Jets quarterback Joe Namath guaranteed a Jets win. Jets 16, Colts 7. But let's not talk Super Bowl III. Let's talk Heidi. On November 17, 1968, NBC presented one of the most beautiful family movies ever made, Heidi. Maximilian Schell, Michael Redgrave, starred with Jennifer Edwards in the title role. Jennifer Edwards, the daughter of Blake Edwards and Julie Andrews, the Pink Panther, Fraulein Maria. Heidi is an orphan, living in a village in the Swiss Alps with her grandfather, and she uses her charm, her wit, her faith to restore those around her. It's a wonderful children's story. The 1937 version starred Shirley Temple in the title role. During the heyday of television, November was Sweeps Week. This was the month when advertisers decided which shows they wanted to sponsor and how much they were willing to pay for the shows the following year. When the networks worked hardest to get the most viewers. One show would bring on celebrity guests, another might have someone kiss, someone might get married, someone might die. This was the week when Ellen came out of the closet and the week when Fonzie jumped the shark. NBC believed that Heidi would bring those advertisers. The show was sponsored by Timex, the watch company. Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. They paid NBC $700,000 to air the show. That's $5.3 million in today's money. It wasn't like it was a rerun of Friends. This was a huge deal. And they expected the movie to start at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, no matter what. Considering these facts, NBC was highly motivated to be on time with Heidi. Music by John Williams, are you kidding me? This was huge. So the NFL, in the 60s, the NFL kicked off its early Sunday games at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and its late games started at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Primetime programming on the network started at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. On November 17, 1968, NBC's 4 o'clock NFL game was in Oakland between the 8-2 Raiders and the 7-3 New York Jets. One of the great AFL rivalries in a game with playoff implications. What happened that night would change sports broadcasting forever. See, in the 1960s, NFL broadcasts lasted about 2.5 hours, compared to the 3-hour plus games we have today. The NFL was more run-oriented, so the clock wasn't stopping after every incompletion. There was no video review, so referees weren't going under the curtain after every fifth play. And there weren't as many advertisers, so networks didn't cut to a commercial after every clock stoppage. The extra point is good, and we'll be right back to our kickoff in about 10 minutes. Afterward from every one of our sponsors. The Jets-Raiders game that day was a back-and-forth affair, worthy of its billing. No team led by more than 8 points until the last 2 seconds, and there were 7 lead changes. And the clock stopped. A lot. Between Joe Namath's 19 of 37 and Darryl LaMonica's 21 of 34, there were 31 incompletions. Clock stoppage. Both teams combined for 39 first downs. Clock stoppage. Both coaches used all of their timeouts. Clock stoppage. 12 scores. Clock stoppage. And a commercial. Most significantly, the two teams combined for 19 penalties. To quote the late, great Keith Jackson, "These two teams don't like each other very much." And the clock stopped with each penalty. The third quarter of the game didn't end until after 6:30 Eastern Time, and it was clear that the game was not going to end until after 7 o'clock, the time that NBC and TimeX's $700,000 expected Heidi to start. Jets fan called NBC, Jets, Jets, wanting to know if the network would finish broadcasting the game before starting the movie. Purveyors of 19th century Swiss Alpine literature called NBC want to know if their movie would start at 7 o'clock as promised. The volume of calls picked up as it got closer to 6:45. Eventually, NBC execs decided to push the start of Heidi to after the game. Unfortunately, the volume of calls had overloaded the NBC switchboards, and no one in programming got the word to delay. At 6:56, with 1:05 left to play in the game, the Jets kicked a field goal to go ahead 32-29, and NBA executives breathed a sigh of relief, believing that the winning score came just before they had to cut through their regularly scheduled programming. On the East Coast and in the Central Time Zones, viewers watched the ensuing kickoff that the Raiders returned to the 22-yard line. With 1:01 remaining in the game, NBC followed through with their obligation to Timex, cutting away from Oakland and starting the presentation of Heidi. The green grass, the dirt infield of Oakland Alameda Stadium, replaced by the grassy meadows and evergreen forests of Alpine Switzerland. And the sweat and blood-tainted uniforms of Ben Davidson and Joe Namath, replaced by a sweet little girl in a trindle and pigtails. There was no cable in 1968, no streaming services, only 3 networks. When NBC cut away, there was no alternative way to watch the last 61 seconds of the game. Rabid Jets fans called NBC, screaming profanities at the receptionists. Casual Jets fans turned the TV off, believing that there was no way that the Raiders could get a winning score in 61 seconds. Not in run-oriented 1968. Meanwhile, back on the West Coast, Darryl LaMonica was leading the Raiders on a 78-yard drive, capped by a 43-yard touchdown pass to Charlie Smith to put the Raiders ahead 36-32. The Raiders then recovered a fumbled Jets kickoff in the end zone, scoring 14 points in the last 9 seconds, and the Raiders won the ballgame 43-32. The Raiders-Jets game ended at 7:07. Ironically, the 1 o'clock start between the San Diego Chargers and the Buffalo Bills ran beyond its 3-hour time slot, and NBC had to cut away from that game to the 4 o'clock kickoff between the Jets and the Raiders. Jets fans on the East Coast called newspapers, TV stations, and any other outlet to find the score. Eventually, NBC displayed a message on screen letting fans know the results of the game. Most Jets fans didn't stick around to watch Heidi. For those watching, the message couldn't have come at a worse time. The most important part of the film, when Heidi's paralyzed cousin takes her first steps out of her wheelchair. Families enjoying the film were outraged that the network interrupted the scene to give the score. NBC couldn't win. After the debacle, the NFL inserted a clause into their contracts that networks had to broadcast the entire game in the team's market. NBC also installed what they called the Heidi phone, which allowed producers to circumvent regular phone lines to report real-time decisions. What was clear was that the fans made the networks subject to the NFL, not the other way around. 3 weeks later, NBC was scheduled to present a live-action version of Pinocchio in their 7 o'clock time slot. In promos for the movie, Pinocchio himself told audiences that he would cut off his nose before he let NBC cut off the football action, inferring that the entire 4 o'clock NFL game would be aired. That wasn't necessary. But when a December Raiders versus Chargers game ran late, NBC pushed all of its network programming back 8 minutes in order to accommodate the finish. But what about Heidi? Some news outlets blamed Heidi herself for the debacle. Newspapers referred to Jennifer Edwards as the little brat in white stockings that ruined a football game. I don't feel bad for NBC. According to Nielsen ratings, Heidi was the highest rated show on television that week. Timex made good on its investment. In 1978, writers for ABC's The Love Boat proposed an episode where Jennifer Edwards, who played Heidi, would meet Joe Namath on the Pacific Princess, somewhere between Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan, and the two would fall in love. That episode never got off the ground. I would have loved to have seen it. And Julie McCoy. Jennifer Edwards did meet Joe Namath on a flight a few years later. She took the time to introduce herself. "Do you remember the Heidi game?" she asked him. "Well, duh," he replied. "Well, I want to formally introduce myself. I'm Heidi." They didn't fall in love. So Heidi, lay off the poor girl. Hey, thanks for coming by. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. If I did it right, you did both. Do you remember the Heidi game? Did you call NBC to complain when they cut away from the Jets and the Raiders to present Heidi? Leave a comment below. Hey, I had fun. Bronk quit my day job. And next time you're watching the game of the week and the network cuts away to the Swiss Alps, remember me. I'm Mark Haggard. I'm a history teacher. And I've gone rogue.